Chapter 5, here we go. Venus and Mars, the two most Earth-like planets in our own solar system. But how Earth-like are they really? Now let's find out. We're going to start with a couple lectures on Venus. So let's get right to it. There you see a picture of Venus, and you can already tell that it is a very cloudy place. You actually can't ever see any surface features, which made it kind of tricky to study it early on. They had to use radar and things like that because unlike Mars, you can't see volcanoes and things like that on the surface. All right, Venus, of course, is the Roman goddess of beauty. And one of the, I think, most commonly viewed things in the sky, I get kids all the time come in, Mr. Jeter, I was out walking the dog early this morning and I saw this super bright, and I already know that that was probably Venus is what they saw. There it is with a crescent moon. Venus is a super bright object. We'll get to the reasons behind that in a bit. Just quickly here, it's also been the goddess of beauty has been the subject of a lot of artwork, famous artwork. So I'm going to have a couple of those in the chapter, and you see at the lower left the famous Venus de Milo. Just for the record, though, it actually was probably originally the Aphrodite statue, because it was actually from ancient Greece, and it was renamed by the ancient Romans. So they named it after they discovered it, Venus de Milo, but it was certainly a statue at the time of Aphrodite, who was the Greek version of Venus. Anyway, first thing you need to know about Venus is, just like Mercury, it hangs out closer to the sun than the Earth, which means there's a limit to how far away we're ever going to see it from the sun. In this case, it's about 47 degrees. That's as far away from the sun that you can see Venus. So just imagine a 45-degree angle with the horizon, right? So straight up is 90 degrees, and you go to 45. That's as high in the sky as it's going to be either before sunrise or after sunset. So you're never going to see it directly over your head. You're never going to see it at 11 o'clock at night or midnight or something like that, okay? So like Mercury, only at dusk or dawn. As a matter of fact, some cultures actually thought it was two different planets. They call it the morning star and the evening star for that reason, which is kind of neat. Now, in this case, if we round that to 45 degrees up and the Earth's rotating 15 degrees per hour, that means at most you can see Venus for about 3 hours. So if the sun sets at 6 o'clock, then it's going to be out until 9 o'clock, just to give you a reference there. But you're not going to see it, like I said, at 10:30, 11, stuff like that. It is already set at that point. Here's a beautiful shot in Spain of a castle on the hill, and you see the crescent moon and Venus in the sky. I love this picture. I think it's pretty neat. I don't know if you can see this, but that's actually a crescent moon there in the foreground. That's the moon, and that little sliver there is Venus. You notice Venus looks like a crescent, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. Venus goes through phases like our moon does, which is how Galileo knew that it was orbiting the sun. That was one of his big things, the way to prove the heliocentric idea that Copernicus had revived. Anyway, so I've compared it to the moon a couple times here because Venus is the third brightest object in the sky. Sun, moon, Venus. That's pretty good company there. It is about 10 times brighter than the brightest star in our night sky, Sirius. Now, why is it so bright? Well, first of all, it is a very highly reflective object. You have all those white clouds and light bounces off of them very efficiently. 70%. I believe Mercury is something like 15% reflective, to give you a comparison. All right. But just like Mercury, you never see the full face of it. And we'll look at a diagram in a moment that explains this. Okay. So think about that. It's already the third brightest object in the sky. And at best, you're seeing about half of it. That's it. And it's still that super bright in the sky, which is pretty neat. When it's on the opposite side of the sun is when it would be like a full moon to us. It'd be a full planet. But the sun's in the way. And at inferior conjunction, when it's closest to the Earth, well, that's going to be out in the daytime. So when do you get to see it? Well, when it's at some kind of odd angle. In fact, It's at its absolute brightest at 39 degrees above the horizon. So just to recap, the highest you'll ever see it in the sky is 47 degrees above the horizon, but it actually peaks in brightness at 39 degrees. So let's just go through this quickly. You notice the female symbol there for Venus. Here's Earth. And at superior conjunction up here, well, the sun is in the way. At inferior conjunction, it's daytime. So you either see it here, and in that case, you'd see it before sunrise, and it's what ancients called the morning star. And then over here, you would see it after sunset, and that's what the ancients called the evening star. Here's what it actually looks like through a telescope. And as I mentioned, this is when Galileo really nailed shut the case for the heliocentric idea, when he saw that it goes from being a crescent to sort of the equivalent of like a quarter moon. Now, there is one time I said that you don't get to see it at inferior conjunction. That's not always quite true. There are some times, very, very rarely, actually specifically twice a century, when you do get to see Venus at inferior conjunction, because it crosses in front of the sun. It transits the sun. Here was one of the last ones. It happened twice kind of in a row, in 2004 and I believe 2012, I want to say. So bam, bam, couple times in a row. And then unfortunately, then it's not going to happen again for many, many, many decades. So I hope you caught it while you could. And that's what it looks like. Now, if you're looking at that and saying, oh my God, Venus is so little. Well, keep in mind, Venus is almost the same size as Earth. So that's really more about the sun being so big. And remember, Venus is actually in the foreground. Venus is a lot closer to us than the sun, and it still looks that small compared to the sun, which is pretty amazing. Here's another shot of that transit back in 2004. So anyway, we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about with Venus. Thanks for listening.